McBraviner here, and just finished playing Dooryard Festival in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and we had a great time. Oh, such a wonderful festival. Man, what a great festival. My son Josh is playing there tonight. Anyway, heading back to Fredericton, but I'm making a little pit stop at a little town that's famous for making cymbals for drums, Sabian cymbals. But I'm not going there for cymbals. I'm going there to find Joe Scott. And I'll tell you about it when I get there because I don't want to be distracted. Right, so I've arrived here at the Lower Meductic Cemetery. And this is to be the final resting place of Joe Scott. And Joe Scott was an interesting man. And I'll tell you about it as I try to look for his grave. We're here. So I'm at the Lower Meductic Cemetery, and it's quite an old cemetery. Some graves were moved here prior to the building of the Meductic Dam. And Joe is buried here in this grave. So we're going to see if we can find him. A lot of Dow is buried here. You can see behind me, it's quite an old cemetery, a lot of old stones, so it might take a little bit of time for us to find Joe Scott. So who was Joe Scott? Well, he was a songwriter. Well, he was a lumberman and a farmer. Grew up around this area, Lower Woodstock area. I believe he was born in 1875, I think it was. No earlier than that. And he went down into Maine in his older life, and but he was a songwriter. And Sandy Ives writes in his book about Joe Scott that if Joe Scott would have lived to be an old man, he would have been perhaps the most prolific writer of New Brunswick songs. He wrote an autobiographical song, which will be on the next album, which will be coming out in 2024. I'm really excited about that. He wrote a song called the Plain Golden Band. It's one of the songs that he wrote, and it's an autobiographical song. When he was down in Maine, he actually died in Augusta, Maine, but they brought his body back up here to be interred. While he was down in Maine, he fell in love with Lizzie, and they were engaged to be married. Anyway, while he was away, fell in love with another man and broke off the engagement. And it was quite heartbreaking for Joe, as I understand it. In fact, he was so heartbroken, they say he never really recovered from his heartbreak. And he lived a really hard life, which caused him in his body to fail. At the age of 50, he passed away in Augusta, Maine, and he was brought up here. So now you can see we've got a little digging to do. Not digging, a little searching for Joe Scott. Let's see what we can find. I'll turn the camera back on when I find it. So I've found a Scott, but it's not Joe. Nelson, age 12. John B. died September 1869. Nellie, age quite young. I don't know if these are relatives or not, but typically in older cemeteries, from my experience, is that families were buried together. So we might be in the area. We'll keep looking. So I'm getting closer. I can't make out a name. It says Scott. Memory of. So there's a Scott there. And then there's John and Sarah. These actually might be his parents. John, Sarah Ann, his wife. Sleep in Jesus. Maurice Scott died. Bertha. Taylor. Joe. So I found him. Here he is. Joseph Scott died 1918, aged 50 years of age, though lost to sight to memory dear. So Joe Scott, this is it. Wow. So As folks know, I like to sing over the grave of these incredible people. I'm here all alone, and I found Joe Scott. He wrote an autobiographical song. I'm going to sing the first verse and the last verse. You'll have to wait for the album to come out for the rest of the song. Joe, this is for you. I'm dreaming tonight of the days past and gone, when the moon slumbers over the mountains at morn, and the dewdrops from heaven like diamonds do glow. They were kissing the roses in the valley below. That's the first verse. The last verse. There's a spot in the forest not very far away, where the deer loves to scamper and the child loves to play. All nature is robed in scenes rich and grand. There you find the author of the plain golden band. He fell in love with Lizzie, and he just never recovered. Could never quite get over it. Joseph W. Scott. Wow. I'm going to turn it off so I can have a moment.